Shalom, everyone. That's a little bit of Hebrew for your Thursday afternoon. Shalom means hello, goodbye, and peace. My name is Abby Jones, and I will be presenting on the music of Israel, comprehending music in Israel during biblical times. Israeli music is a vast topic full of very detailed information, all of which I am unable to cover in a short 15 minutes, but this presentation is a brief outlook on some of the characteristics that define Israeli music during the biblical times. As we dive into this presentation, I will begin with some background information on the location and history of Israel. The country of Israel is located in the Middle East and is by the Mediterranean Sea on the eastern shores, as seen in this image. It is surrounded by Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and Lebanon. Much of Israel's history dates back to the ancient biblical stories that are told in the Hebrew Bible, many of which I will be discussing further into this presentation. So Israeli music consists of numerous different aspects that define its unique sound. Three of the main aspects of Israeli music are melody, rhythm, and harmony. Melodies in Israeli music are typically made up of different parts and have patterns within them that are usually repetitive. They consist of several music motives. A motive is a short melodic phrase that variates into longer and more developed phrases. Rhythm in Israeli music has what is known as non-notated rhythm or non-standard music notation, which ignores the Western notation system. The difference between Western music and non-Western music is that non-Western music may have no harmony or different scale systems. Harmonies in Israeli music are typically sung by both men and women, and harmonies were created by the use of multiple scales and were used widely in musical performances. So Israeli music consists of multiple unique instruments, some of which you may be familiar with. These are cymbals, tambourines, the sistrum, harps, the lyre, horns, trumpets, the bagpipe, the zither, drums, and vocals, which can sometimes be left out of instrumental lists. To define some of these instruments for you, the sistrum has a metal frame with metal rods that rattle when the instrument is shaken. A zither is a flat wooden stringed instrument that can be played in the lap. This instrument has many strings across its frame that are played by plucking the strings. The instruments listed here play many important roles within the history of biblical times, many of which are stated in the Bible through the stories. Trumpets and horns were used during special events for leading and signaling worship. For example, trumpets were used to let people know when it was time to worship, and was also used to signal certain events, like ones I stated earlier. Tambourines, drums, cymbals, and other percussion instruments were used during celebrations, special occasions, and events. For example, the story of Miriam and the Israelite women are mentioned using drums, tambourines, and dancing to celebrate their victory in escaping enslavement to Egypt. The harp, lyre, and other string instruments were mainly used in entertainment specifically for royalty. An example of this is David is mentioned in the Bible playing his harp for King Saul. As you can see, many of these instruments were used for specific purposes during biblical times. Many of the instruments I discussed previously are mentioned in stories in the Bible. Listed here, I have 3 examples of stories from the Bible where the use of instruments and their roles can be found. To describe these instruments and their use in Bible stories, I am using both Western and modern names for the instruments. So in 2 Samuel 6:5, David and the Israelites are mentioned celebrating and worshiping God with harps, cymbals, tambourines, and other stringed instruments. In 1 Samuel 16:16, a prayer is being said asking the Lord to command his servants to find a man who has musical skills in playing the harp. This way, if bad spirits come, the music played from the harp will lead the bad spirits away and enlighten your emotions. In Judges 11:34, Jephthah's daughter is coming to greet him with a tambourine playing and dancing when he arrives home. And these are just a brief outlook on the many stories mentioned in the Bible that describe the use of instruments during the biblical times. So, as many instruments I had mentioned before, they are also depicted within art and pictures to give us an idea of what these instruments from this period would have looked like. These three images I have pictured here are different instruments and their use within Bible stories. The first image shows King David playing his harp. King David was the second king of Israel. The second image shows the story of Gideon, who was called on by God to save the Israelites. You're able to see the use of trumpets and horns, which were used during that time as signals or call signs. In this case, they are being used during battle. The trumpets in this image are more primitive, which is why they look slightly different to what we may think a trumpet looks like today. The final image I have is one of my personal favorite stories. It shows Miriam and the Israelite women performing what is known as the Song of the Sea. And you can see in the image here they are using a type of hand drum. The Song of the Sea was performed in honor of the victory the Israelites had when they escaped enslavement to Egypt. So here's a video example of a harp similar to what King David would have played, as shown in the image on the previous slide. Israeli music was a major role within society, and in these next slides I will go more in depth discussing their functional impact within society. So music played numerous roles during the biblical times, and they were used during laborious work, celebrations, special events, festivals, victories, worship, and to express feeling and emotion. Music in Israel was widely used in worship, which is one way it was integrated into the religion of the Israelites. Musical worship was used as a way of connection to God, to send him praises, to give him thanks, and to feel the presence of the Lord. Music was a substantial part of politics through its growth in the culture of Israel. Musicians and singers were highly praised during this time for their talent. Many musicians and singers were hired to serve as a form of entertainment, many of whom would entertain royalty. A musician and or singer's role became a very well-respected job that was well-paid. This allowed for musicians and singers to receive a higher rank within their society for the importance of their skill and their talent. Musicians and singers in this position would strive for perfection in their work because of the high demand for satisfying entertainment. For example, many kings and queens would search for musicians and singers who were capable of delivering promising and strong entertainment for their guests and for themselves. Music in Israel was an important part of communication because music was used as a form of communication between God and his people. God instructed the use of music for ritual and worship purposes, and the language spoken in Israel was also a significant part of the music as well. The common spoken language in Israel during this time was Hebrew. As I have briefly mentioned, entertainment in Israel was a vast portion of the biblical period and consists of many roles such as religious gatherings, events, celebrations, festivals, worship, and the list continues on and on. Music was highly used as a form of entertainment among kings and queens, and royalty would often hire musicians and singers to perform for personal entertainment. Dance and music was also used as a form of entertainment and was used solely to express joy, passion, and hope. So, how was music integrated into the culture of Israel? Well, music in Israel began as a much simpler musical style and grew over time, becoming more complex, and it has continued to evolve. Music contained the expression of feelings and emotions, but also incorporated musical aspects such as melody, rhythm, and harmony, as I had mentioned earlier. Music was popular among the Israeli population, and many men and women were active musicians, singers, and performers within their culture. Music was integrated into Israeli culture through its roles in worship, entertainment, and its uses in religious aspects, and so much more. So Israeli music has been impacted by history throughout time, which has led to the evolution of the music to what it is today. Many of the stories in the Bible share some of those events in history that have been a substantial part of Israeli music. Israeli music, especially Jewish and Christian music, has continued to evolve from classical religious worship music and hymns into what we consider as more westernized music and worship. Here is a beautiful video example of a modernized Israeli worship service being sung by a ministry group. And this video takes place in Jerusalem, which is the capital of Israel. And in this video, they are singing a song called You Lift Me, which is sung in Hebrew. So are there any questions that you have at this time regarding the information I have discussed? Okay. I have one final portion. It involves a little bit of audience interaction. So as I mentioned before, shalom in Hebrew means hello, goodbye, and peace. In closing this presentation, I would like to have a bit of audience participation. So I will say shalom to you, and you will say shalom to me. Are you ready? Shalom. Shalom. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have enjoyed my presentation on Israeli music during biblical times.